Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's the Cyber Shinobi, brought to us by Sega. The Cyber Shinobi is actually the third Shinobi game released for home console. It was released for the Sega Master System in 1990 and was released only in Europe, Australia, and Brazil. The Master System at the time was already discontinued in many other markets, including North America. The game serves as a sequel to the original Shinobi, but takes place in the future. So here we go with the Cyber Shinobi for the Sega Master System. When the game starts up, you're greeted with a pretty lengthy opening story to get you started. While being the technical third Shinobi console game, it actually is called Part 2 at the title screen. When you press start at the startup screen, you'll go to round number 1. Now the game is a little bit different than some of the other Shinobi games. Here you'll compete with a number of different enemy types, usually having to defeat a certain amount of enemies before you're able to move the screen forward. Kinda like a traditional beat-em-up style game like Sega's other franchise, Streets of Rage. On the top of the screen, you have your life bar, obviously your current health, your power bar, which will increase the amount of damage that you do, and you can pick up various amounts of power by destroying boxes in the game, which also can give you new ninjutsu power-ups or new shots. The shots work like bullets, shurikens, or grenades, and you have a certain amount of them that you can use at your disposal. You can then pick up more ammo at different crates, just like you can with your health and power-up. Below that, of course, also is the time in the lower left part of that, and if you do not complete a stage within a given time, you end up losing a life. There are a decent amount of enemies. The most annoying in the first level are definitely the gun guys. These guys will, of course, fire at you at a consistent rate, being able to knock you back and give you trouble while trying to move up different platforms. The standard green jumpsuit enemy can be taken out with just a couple of quick attacks. Use the elevator to take out this guy and the screen will scroll by. Next up, you'll have to jump on a series of sandbags, climbing your way up to the top, taking out a different gunner at each level. There is a box located on each of the levels that you can pick up and increase one of your different abilities. The hit detection in the game can be a little bit iffy at times for sure. When you walk into enemies, you'll be knocked back, but you won't necessarily take damage. You'll only take damage from direct attacks from the enemies or projectiles from the gun-style enemies. Once you're able to get used to how the basic attack goes in the game, you'll start to be able to breeze through a lot of the regular enemies. The best thing for the gun guys is to either try to jump over the bullets in order to close the distance between you and them. You don't want to just walk straight forward into the oncoming hail of bullets. One of the worst parts about the game is the fallaway platforms. During certain segments of the game, the platform that you're standing on, of course, will fall and cause a pit to form, and if you end up in that pit, you're going to lose a life. Now, there's a few instances of this, and the last one that we were just on, there is several areas of that platform that will fall away, and because the jumping is a bit late in the game, it can be difficult to get out of those situations. So the best bet is to know when they're coming, and to jump over them before you end up falling. During this segment, you ride the elevator up to each floor. You have to go all the way over to the right and defeat the enemies. You can of course also grab the box if you want to, but the key is to defeat the enemies, and then you can go back to the elevator and you can raise it to the next level. This part is definitely a little drawn out, but it's just more of a time nuisance than anything else. Try to keep an eye on your health. You can get a little bit of life while here. The problem, of course, being able to dodge those bullets, which is easier said than done. You can also crawl and walk, so use that in order to get under some of the bullets. It's kind of funny, but the first level of the game is actually the longest level of the game overall. It seems to have the most amount of enemies that must be defeated in order to get through it. Take out the two guys in the green suits and then go all the way over in order to grab some more health if you need it. Once those two green guys have been defeated, though, you could go back to the elevator if you want it. Once up here, you want to jump on top of the boxes. Holding up and jump will allow you to jump to higher platforms. Try to do your best to jump in between bullet fire from the guy and be able to hit him. Then walk to the right and the platform will explode, causing you to drop down quite a ways. Eventually, if you're hugging the right side, you'll land on top of construction equipment. This giant bulldozer is your boss for the level. Jump on top of it and hit the window of the boss in order to do damage, and it'll fly back off screen. Every time it does, you'll land back on the ground. You'll want to wait a few seconds for it to pop out of that right side, so you can then do a big jump up and land on top of it safely without getting hit by it. Getting hit by any part of it other than landing directly on top will, of course, take away a good amount of life. Now, it'll take several hits to defeat the boss, but overall, it's a pretty simple boss fight. After you just defeat it, we'll get our score racked up and we'll move on to level 2. Level number 2 is the Sea Boat. Introduces some new enemies, including the red and gray ninjas. These female ninjas have a few different things to their arsenal, being able to throw out projectiles. For the most part, you'll be able to duck underneath the projectiles that they fire out, get in close, and then just mash the attack button. Once you hit them one time, if you just keep mashing that attack button, you should be able to hit it multiple times. Now, since we've gotten the gun-like projectile, we'll use that on the platform in order to take out the two gunners before jumping up. Thankfully, in this game, we can't destroy the power-ups we end up dropping from boxes. Once you've scrolled the screen over, head all the way over to the right and take out the gunner who's trying to hide and fire at you, before then battling the other female ninjas that end up appearing. Once you've gotten a good hang of the female ninjas, this is pretty much what we'll be dealing with for most of the rest of the game. Climb this box and try to use your projectile to hit the gunner on the opposite side of the crate while still battling some of the female ninjas. Here I find just jumping on top of the guys and kind of bouncing off of them in order to get to the ground level is the best way to get past some of these gunners. Wait for, of course, the gunner to fire before jumping up, taking him out, and opening up the box. If you actually use buttons 1 and 2 together, you'll use your ninjutsu, which will take out the enemies currently on screen. A lot of the time, though, I actually forget I even have the ability to use it, but you can, especially when you get in tight situations, to wipe the screen of everybody on it. Once you've taken out all the enemies here, move across the top platform, but jump. You want to make sure that you jump over a couple of the crates so that you don't step directly in the center of those first couple, because it'll end up causing the crate to plummet into the ground below. On the next screen, though, you can just jump over a couple of those gunner guys, getting in between them and their bullets so that you're able to hit them. During this segment, though, there are more of those falling platforms. I try to land on the lettering, as that seems to be a good spot to land safely. If you end up seeing yourself falling, mash the up and jump buttons as best as you can to hope you're able to jump out of the pit before the platform fully falls to the ground. The enemy variety and all can definitely make the game a little bit monotonous, beating the same groups of enemies throughout. Thankfully though, the first 2 levels are really strict with a lot of the enemies that you'll have to defeat before moving on. However, they kind of loosen that a bit in some of the later levels. Also changing up the way the levels are designed a bit as we get farther into the game, so they don't stick with just this kind of formula for the whole thing. Walk across the gurney here, you'll jump up to get another gunner, and then over here you'll drop down. As you can see, it's kind of separated, but you'll fall down that segment of the gurney, and you'll be amongst a lot of gunners. You'll have to battle a couple of gray ninjas, the red ninja if you hadn't taken that one out, and the gunners themselves. Once they have been disposed of, you'll want to jump up and over the boxes and continue to the right for the boss fight of level 2. The boss is a giant U-7 submarine, and when it pops out, it'll have missiles firing out of different compartments. Your goal is, when the missiles come out of a certain compartment, to attack it with your either straight up attack, or you can duck and hit it with your legs. After the missiles have been launched up, they of course will come back down, so try to get away from them or stand in between the missiles as they come down to avoid taking damage. Once you've destroyed all the compartments, you've destroyed the boss, and you'll move on to level 3. The boss for level 3 is the Heliblast, and you're going to be seeing the helicopter right away. This giant helicopter will drop big bombs that will end up causing a ripple effect of fire all throughout the ground. Keep walking over to the right and doing big jumps up into the air every time one of the missiles comes down. When you make it to the far right side and the screen stops scrolling, you'll have to wait here until the helicopter drops a certain amount of bombs. After it drops a certain amount, you'll eventually be able to finally scroll the screen over. Here we're going to be introduced to a new enemy, the jetpack guys. They only take a single hit to destroy, but if they run into you, they do severe amount of damage to you, so you have to be careful. Besides them, you'll also be tangling with some of those green suited guys. Thankfully, we only have to defeat 2 here before we're able to move the screen. Another one of the jetpack guys will come up with another green suitor, and we'll keep moving along our way. If you have ninjutsu, you may want to use that during the jetpack guys, because you'll destroy both and of course avoid damage. After a set of 2 more jetpack guys, you'll have another one of the ones with the green guy. Pretty simple. You'll hit one, turn around, try to hit the other. Because the movement of your character is relatively slow, it can be tricky to hit one and then quickly turn around and hit the other before he ends up running into you. Eventually the screen will stop rolling, you'll be able to make it to the next boss fight. For this boss, we'll be attacking the front of the helicopter as it continues to drop bombs, the only difference being that the helicopter is low enough to actually take damage. Earlier, you could jump up and try to hit it, but it wouldn't have done anything. A very simple boss fight. You want to, of course, make sure that you keep jumping in a nice, timely fashion to avoid all the fire, and you'll move on to level 4. Level number 4 is a jungle-themed stage. Thankfully, the whole thing of taking out like 1 or 2 enemies and then being able to move the screen continues here. However, new perils will be introduced in the forms of totems and different types of spikes you'll have to battle. When the ninjas are coming from both right and left, it's a good idea to duck down. One usually ends up trying to throw shurikens at you. The next segment, you're going to have rocks coming down. There's several rocks falling down at once. The best bet is to try to get in between them or just duck down and crawl walk. This way it'll allow them to bounce over your head and you have a less chance of getting clipped by them. You'll have these giant bird-like totems. In order to hit them, you'll have to walk up close to them, duck down, and do the kick. When crossing a bridge, you'll see two different types of the platform itself. One that's going to stay still, and the other, the lighter colored one with less rings, will actually fall when you land on them. So you want to try to jump over as many of those as possible without stepping directly on them. Wait for all the rocks to fall down, and then attempt to try to jump over the fall-away platforms. In the next room, duck down and immediately attack and kick out the totem before it's able to even get any hits out at you. Do big jumps over the giant spikes popping out of the ground so you avoid them even touching you at all. Next up, more rocks, so do the crawl walk to help you. You'll probably get hit a time or two, but you should be able to avoid most of them. You'll do the same, just keep on crawling and walking to battle the next totem. The next room is a little bit difficult because you'll have 4 spikes on the ground, but also have to battle a series of enemies. You can stay on one side of the screen if you want, or use types of weapons if you have them, such as the grenades or the gun, to help you hit longer distances on the screen. You'll have to take out 2 of the green suit guys, then 2 red ninjas, and finally 2 of the gray ninjas. Once they're all done, do big jumps and keep on moving. Here, it's impossible to not land on some of the platforms, so keep doing giant jumps. The next boss is a big panther. Do a kick to the panther to knock it off of screen. When it comes back, just keep repeating the process of knocking it off the screen. Sometimes it will jump. When it does this, try to avoid being directly in front of it while it tries to run back. Either jump over it, or just keep mashing the attack button until you do damage. I love the little funny glitch you can do with the grenade. Hitting it with one will cause it flying and screaming across the screen. After you've done enough damage to it though, it will drop and you'll move on to round 5. Round 5 is easily the most interesting level in the game. All you're doing is falling throughout the entire level. Amongst the level, there are a bunch of platforms you can land on to power up. This is a good opportunity to increase your ninjutsu if you've lost any of it, bring back your shot counter, or especially bring up that power meter. I haven't spent a lot of time grabbing all the various items throughout, but I'll pick up a few boxes here and there while I'm falling through to grab some extra power. When you make it to the bottom of the waterfall, it's time for the red hopper boss. This boss is one of the more difficult ones to actually do damage to. You'll attack it in the front of it in order to hit it, but the hit detection on when you do damage is a little bit tricky. Also, when he jumps and runs into you, he does a lot of damage and can drain your health really quick, doing it in bunches of 2 at a time. Once you've done enough damage though, he will explode, and we're going to move on to the final level of the game. Level number 6 is inside of the Zed factory. When we start off the level, thankfully there's a couple of boxes here. You can pick up some more power-ups or replenish some things if you need to after that last boss. You'll also have to deal with the enemies that come in pairs of 2s. This can include, of course, the jetpack guys during this stage. Next, 2 big giant walls will appear, trying to squish you in the middle. Just keep mashing the attack button. As long as the wall doesn't hit you directly, you won't take any damage. Next up, you'll have a series of electrical fields. Wait for the right opportunity for it to dissipate for a second so that you can then move on through. You'll be seeing these throughout the rest of the area, including also these gunners. These guns move up and down. You can't destroy them, but you have to destroy all the other enemies on screen before you're able to scroll past them. Try to get behind the guns if possible before dealing with the actual enemies. This works for the most part, but you will have an opportunity later on where there's going to be a gun at the very edge of the screen, making it difficult. When you make it to this part, try to take out the gunner, take out the guy, and be sure to grab the health when you can before going off screen and it's time for the final boss. The final boss will charge you, allowing you to hit him. When he has the shield up, you cannot do any damage, and the boss has 3 attacks. It has grenades, a long extendable arm that you'll have to duck underneath, as well as the straight gunfire that you can jump over. The grenades are the trickiest to jump over. You'll have to time your jump right before the grenade ends up hitting you sometimes, and then doing a big, tall jump to avoid getting hit by them. It's a pretty long, drawn-out battle at times because you're at the mercy of the boss actually putting down the shield and trying to charge you. However, since this is the final boss, and as far as final bosses go, this one isn't that bad. It does take several hits, but once the boss has been defeated, walk over to the giant brain in the tube on the right side and attack that, and you can sit back and enjoy the ending to Cyber Shinobi. So there you have the Cyber Shinobi for the Sega Master System. Well, easily not the best game in the Shinobi franchise, and without it coming to North America, I can't say that we missed out on too much. But there is some nice music spattered throughout the game, and overall, it's not a terrible experience. While this one may not be the most recommendable of the Shinobi games, I do of course highly recommend checking out the Game Gear games if you haven't done that, and of course the Sega Genesis titles, especially Revenge of Shinobi and Shinobi 3. Another little gem that's also on Master System is actually Alex Kidd in Shinobi World, combining two of Sega's biggest franchises, Alex Kidd and Shinobi. You'll see the presented by Sega screen followed by the end, and then after pressing start you'll get to see one last screen of your high score as well as the score you got for the game. But with that, it's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.